Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your moderator, Vice President and Head of Americas and South Pacific for CWT Meetings and Events, Tony Wagner.
Thank you, everyone, and we really appreciate you joining us at this center stage event for talking about the opportunity and value delivered by bringing travel and meetings together. I'm blessed to have a panel here that's excited, passionate, and sages in the industry, right, associated with travel and meetings. And so I'd like to introduce first Karen Hutchings, who's the Global Head of Travel, Meetings, Events, and Brand Management Procurement at EY. To Karen's left is Sean Parker, who's the Executive Director of Corporate Group Sales at Hilton Worldwide. And at the end is Ron Shaw, who is the founder and CEO of Bisley. So today we know we have a number of people in the audience that are just maybe starting out, thinking about managing travel and meetings as an integrated category, some that are a little bit more experienced. And so what we wanted to do is really start with a couple polls that give us a baseline of what this room is really thinking right now from a scope of responsibility associated with travel and meetings. And so you'll see up here on the screen really a question that says today, for those buyers in the room, does your scope include managing travel and meetings categories? And there's really 4 answers, right? The first one, yep, I got this. I own both. Nope, someone else does. Or no, we haven't even really started down this path yet. And finally, if you want to indicate you're a supplier, we have a couple questions or a question later for you in the program. And so as we see the results coming up here, we're seeing that as expected, I think for this panel, right, that there is quite a bit of a growing ownership of travel and meetings here in this category at 44+% is what we're seeing. We wanted to explore this a little bit more, and so if we can go maybe to the second question when this is ready, we want to try to explore for those buyers the idea of, are you managing travel and meetings together just at a solely procurement and sourcing lens, or do you also, in the scope of your responsibility, also have ownership for logistics execution and or meeting design? So it looks like, surprising to me, it's more a little bit half and half, a little bit more than just sourcing, which I think is a great trend we're seeing here in the business. Awesome. Great. Well, why don't we move on to kind of setting up the stage, because our goal here is to have quite a bit of interaction. So we have 44+% that are managing travel and meetings. We have 50% that are managing that holistically, including execution. So I'd like to kind of move on to, I think, some key statistics that we see here in the business that talk about the power of the meetings industry and events overall. So first, over $1 trillion is spent globally every year just in business-to-business events. That's an impressive number. Here in the US alone, we have 1.9 million meetings that happen every single year. But the trend and the stat that to me is most important as you think about bringing these categories together is the third one. 62% of marketing executives are planning to increase their budget on live events this year, and we see that continuing next year. Why is that? Because events are growing the top line for those businesses, and there's more and more data that is showing that events are one of the bigger driver to top line growth. And that is even with executives that are having some declining or stagnant budgets, right? And then for those that are managing meeting teams or thinking about being in the meetings and events industry, here in the US, 11% is the expected growth of event planning roles by 2026. That's 4 percentage points greater than the average job growth here in the US. So I think you can kind of see, events are powerful, right? This has historically been more of a business travel conference. There is massive opportunity for customers and companies to really integrate travel and meetings, and I think now we really want to kind of explore this with the panel. And so first I'm going to start with Karen. Karen, we've talked about this growth of events. We've talked about the integration that we're seeing in roles and responsibilities. Where does the value come from is the first part of the question, and what do we really see as some of the value things that are being delivered between the integration?
Sure. So I think, in many of the suppliers that you work with from a travel perspective are very similar from a meetings and events perspective. So I think there's opportunity there when it comes to aligning your expenditure and how you negotiate on that. But I think, if you think about some of the quick wins that you can make, it's always historically, as an example, with events being, you negotiate on the venue, but there's no consideration given as to where people may be coming from to get to that event. And so looking at that total event cost, i.e. the flights to get somebody there, and then looking at the trends and the booking patterns as to how do they actually book their flights. And so if you think about the principles that we have in travel about encouraging further bookings in advance, etc., then bringing that from a meetings and events perspective, we've certainly seen huge opportunity and savings when it comes to actually getting people to book their flights further in advance, but also taking into account where the event may take place and where people are moving from. Because before it was always just focused on the actual event and the venue versus how people were getting there. So that would be the quick win. And I think just the other thing to add as well is around duty of care, of knowing where our employees are and ensuring that we actually see where they're trending as to where they're traveling as when they're going to the event as well.
Definitely, I think those are some common integration points we see when we're out in the industry, and I think many of you have experienced. And one of the other ones that we tend to see is this idea of really that intuitively combining travel and meeting spend will add incremental value to a supplier relationship, which then transforms into value for buyers in this group. So I think what we want to do now is move on to a quick supplier polling question. And this is for suppliers in the room. Suppliers, do you value a partner more if you combine travel and meeting spend together? And so I think if the poll comes up on the screen here, there's really two answers, yes or no, for the most part. And so while we're doing that, I guess my question is to Sean. Sean, do you see this? Is this true?
Tony, I think as the poll shows, it's no mystery that the opportunity for a supplier to play for big spend is exciting. However, I would argue that big opportunity is truly revealed when a buyer demonstrates an ability to control and influence that spend. It's not only what you can spend, but what you can move. When that buyer knows the value of their travel, their meetings, their project business, and they have the ability to move that to a preferred supplier partner, I would say they're in a great position to receive greater benefits. That's
great. And I think the audience is agreeing with you, Sean.
Absolutely.
A follow-up question I kind of have is, with our buyers in the room that are looking at combining this category, is there certain characteristics that make it more appealing if you're combining travel and meetings, whether it's size or overlap with properties or different maybe concentration of where those are at, or how does Hilton approach that?
Absolutely. I would say for us, the value, a high volume of simple meetings as well as complex meetings, the opportunity to use multiple brands. We have a broad brand portfolio. Also thinking about extended stay in project business. A lot of times that's hidden spend that's really exciting to us. When we put all of those variables into our calculator, those that fall at the higher end of the spectrum are absolutely privy to greater executive engagement, the ability for us to consistently put an MSA in place and consistently execute upon that, as well as a strong account team that's supporting you for small meetings, international business travel. And we do it in a one-team collaborative way.
Definitely. I think we've seen that as we engage with customers that have brought these categories together. You see time savings, right? You see relationship engagement. And I think that adds to value created in a combined category. So Ron, you and I are out a lot talking to potential customers, right, about meeting programs. And so, one of the questions I hear a lot is, where do we start, right? What defines a meeting? And so a question for you a little bit is, where do you, as you think about drawing that line for meetings and what's in a program, does every meeting need to be included? And talk a little bit about the cost-value relationship of fulfilling a meeting and the values generated.
All right, cool. So let me get a show of hands real quick. Who here loves event contracts? Quick show of hands. I don't see any. All right. So as we all know, if you're doing an event, if it requires any event space or any sleeping room blocks over 9 rooms, you need a contract, right? So if there's contracts involved, you want visibility to it, because you want to manage those risks. And those risks are contract risks and duty of care risks. So it does need to be managed, right? So you want to manage almost every meeting, but it doesn't have to be this big brother type of management style. We have tools today to make it really efficient and keep the costs low, but bring a lot of value, right? So the value is not just lowering your risk profile, but unlocking savings opportunities. But most importantly, today, when you look at events, you talk to marketing people, talk to HR, sales, everyone is now using these smaller events to improve their KPIs, right? So it's not, today it's not just digital. You have to get people in a room and get things done. And so they need the service.
Sure.
And so the value can be enormous. It can add shareholder value and really have a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think it'd be great for you to expand a little bit, Ron. A lot of times people will say we want to manage all the events, but if you do it in the way where there's labor involved, it's a little more challenging, right, on the smaller event side. Talk to me a little bit about, especially in your space, self-service small meeting technologies, and how that's maybe helping that value equation, and maybe a little bit some of the barriers you're encountering.
Yeah, absolutely. So self-service, we're definitely getting there. All right, so what we've learned in our journey is that when a user and employee wants to build an event, there's actually a lot of things they have to do. It's not just booking a venue, it's not just event registration, it's the whole thing, right? You have to do an itinerary, you have to send invites, and so you really have to combine these things around the use case and profile of the person. Our view is the future is about instant personalization. I want to click one button, allow that to apply my corporate rates, my corporate contract, apply all the sort of needs that I have around event design around me. Right? That's what we're building, that's what we're heading towards. I would say the biggest barrier is really that event contract, right? So when you book a flight on Delta, you don't need to think about what my force majeure clause is. But in events, we still have this. So I kind of look at everyone here and say, let's get rid of these, let's come up with a universal event contract. I think that would be a major barrier that we could eliminate towards success.
Yeah. So I think it's one of those pieces that cost value equation is challenging sometimes. Self-service technology is, I think, what we're all aspiring to see be rolled out more and more in the small meeting space. And so speaking of challenges, I think this is for everyone. We'll start, Karen, with you. As you think about travel and meetings coming together, right? Obviously, it's intuitively value-added, but there are challenges. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what challenges you've seen and some recommendations you'd have to overcome them.
So I think, it is like herding cats. I'm not going to lie when you're trying to bring all of this together. And I think just the increase in internal stakeholder engagement is huge. It's really trying to identify as well who you need to be speaking to. So your marketing department, your talent, learning and development. But then you have that whole executive assistant network as well, because they're also doing a lot. And so I think what you need to go with is like a solution-driven opportunity though. And so going back to Ron and talking about technology that's out there, I think, the one thing that we see is the principles that we have of managing a travel program, engaging with some of the startups and disruptors is now happening in the meetings and events space. And so what we're trying to do is not take away the responsibility, but actually say that we're there to help them with their logistics so that they can concentrate on the content. Because ultimately, that's what they should be spending their time doing, is looking at how do they make that experience of the attendee the best. So if we can make the whole process of booking the event simpler, then that actually gives them more time to be able to concentrate on that actual attendee experience. And so that's really what we've led with when we've gone out and trying to grab a handle of this, is actually talking about we're going to ease some of their pressure so that they can make the event more special. And I think, though, you just have to be open that you're going to spend a lot of time talking to a lot of people to convince them. And so you need to go with solutions in your toolkit just to make it easier. That's what I would say.
And I agree with that. I think, a lot of the components, when you think about maybe, and this happened early on in the travel days, you had to engage stakeholders to bring deconsolidated programs into a consolidated approach. Same thing happens with meetings and events. And Ron, appreciate your perspective, especially as we think of marketing buyers. They control the big spend.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. Like travel managers, we talk to travel managers a lot, right? And the common thing we hear is, I don't know how many events I'm doing. Marketing doesn't tell me about their events, or sales doesn't. They just don't get their arms around it. So I think the two big challenges is giving the rest of the organization a tool they actually want to use that actually helps their jobs and makes them more successful. The second thing is we're resource constrained. How do we get the budget, and how do we actually unlock this? And so what we find is four takeaways, right? One is the risk reduction, which I talked about, the duty of care and the contract risk reduction. The second is a shared services model, where you can work with other departments. The third is, getting commission on sometimes these smaller off-put meetings that you don't get visibility on. And the fourth is just like spend consolidation. So there's lots of ways to solve these problems.
Definitely. And Sean, from your standpoint, as you're thinking about working with some of your corporate customers, right, from a group standpoint, what are you seeing as challenges and ways to overcome them?
For me, I think about just change management and the ability to help that customer get their stakeholders on board. We talked in our meetings committee session on SMMP yesterday about the critical importance of a strong internal communication plan, as well as illustrating the benefits of adopting the program. My recommendation to buyers is work with a supplier partner that can deliver on the promise. Truly deliver on the promise through having a fully aligned total account management team. I think the concept of total account management isn't new, but is it one person trying to juggle both? Yep. Or is it truly a team working in a collaborative effort to really identify savings, to execute those MSAs that are in place, and to really provide increased resources to help you achieve those objectives that you're working towards?
Definitely, I think this is a journey, right, that
Absolutely.
the teams have to go down across the travel meetings and definitely the marketing spend organizations as we go forward. So speaking of forward, I think, part of our mission up here was to kind of really bring out some forward-thinking ideas on how to really optimize this category and really be forward-thinking overall. So Karen, I think from all accounts as we've worked together, right, you're kind of a trendsetter. At least I'd like to say that, right?
Concerning.
So, I think a little bit, it'd be nice to hear from you a little bit about what some of the real forward activities you're taking in EY and you've seen in your peers around the world, and how you're trying to optimize this category together.
Yeah, so I think for us, when we started it, it was really about just getting that visibility of the data. And so, now we've got that, it's been able to give us, though, the opportunity to really see what our spend is that's happening by country. And by doing that now, we're actually able to we have the ability to bulk purchase. So, we look at events that could be potentially happening in New York, and we may have 50 over 6 months. Well, we don't just negotiate by event now. True. We negotiate collectively on them. You have to get the data in the first place, though, to be able to go and engage with the suppliers, to be able to have that conversation. We're also very much seeing, though, like the technology out there to be able to book small meetings, get instant confirmations. And that's huge for us, actually, because that goes back to the point that we said earlier about making the lives of individuals easier that are actually booking events. Definitely. So we've implemented a number of different online booking tools. That says it all, though, the fact that we have to implement a number of different tools, because really across the globe there is not one that actually fits. But rather than spend our time complaining about it, we just implement multiple, because at least we're solutioning. I think the big thing that we're seeing, though, at the events is about how is the engagement of the attendees. And so there's a lot of technology out there now that can actually monitor what the response is of attendees, how much they're engaged in a particular stand, how much they're engaged in an event and a breakout. So when you do the voting, make sure that you're very engaged in this one, because that's always good for us, actually, just to put it out there. But I think, though, understanding how people feel about when they're at the events now, because if I take EY as an example, 80% of our events are internal. So we see it as a real vehicle of employee engagement, of employee retention. And so we want to make sure when they have their experience that they're actually enjoying that. And so monitoring that and using that technology is actually the big thing that we're looking at now.
Definitely, I think you hit on a big point. We won't probably be able to explore it too much, but the data that's available for this is mind-boggling, right? I mean, as you walk in and out, people are measuring you. When you're at a session nowadays, we even have deployed a facial recognition technology that looks at your expressions in your face to see, are you really engaged? And if you have 10 speakers, how engaged are you? And one time the CEO was ranked number 10 out of 10, right? So think about that conversation afterwards. But Sean, your thoughts on kind of this topic of forward-thinking activities in the meetings and event space together with travel?
I would say continue with Karen's theme of technology. I talk to customers all the time, And the concept of a consistent technology experience, whether your travelers are traveling for individual business travel or they're attending a meeting, it's not really considered a luxury, but a necessity. So, for example, with the Signia Hilton brand, we're focused on, in addition to digital key and connected room, there's a very deliberate focus on delivering an advanced, integrated technology experience, whether you're in the sleeping room, the public space, or the meeting room. And my thought is that we're only at the cutting edge of what this might look like in the future.
Great. Ron?
Yeah, look, I think that when we look ahead, we start from right now, right? So what I see the most success with is people that take this agile method, especially buyers that say, okay, I have this preferred hotel program, I have these contracts that I know that work, and I have these power users. Let me start with them and grow agile to get this global rollout rather than that big bang theory. That's one that we always see works well. The other thing is, I think the future, as I mentioned earlier, is this idea of instant personalization for both travel and events, where really it's a seamless experience. It's kind of like Amazon. It gets to know you better, and it constantly serves your needs on a real-time basis, both on the event side and the travel side. That's really the future of the space, the way we see it.
Definitely. Well, I think, this has been, a short session, right, in our time together here. I think we want to give you definitely a few takeaways that at least we heard and prepared as a panel. So I don't know if you can put up the slides there, but I think we see, and I hope you heard the passion, that there's a clear value in combining travel and meetings, whether it be savings, whether it be risk management, whether it be really just this visibility that Karen talked about. Secondly, hoteliers value this, right? Other suppliers value this. And so when you can bring your spend together from transient meetings and events and activities like extended stay, there's a joint value equation for you as a buyer and the supplier overall. Stakeholder engagement is critical. You'll hear that a lot in the meetings and events space, but specifically with the individuals in marketing that are driving the big spend. They are the ones that are really using events as a tool to grow your top line revenue for your company. And as we've all talked about, technology is an enabler, whether it is improving automation, whether it is how to improve the engagement at the event for attendees, that's the value. And so when this comes together between travel and meetings, there's many intersection points, tactically and strategically. And data is the key piece of it all, right? It brings it together for that we can all make sure that we're data literate and extract those insights for this really value creation of bringing travel and meetings together. So again, in our 25 minutes together, we covered a lot. It was short, right? I think they were even running 5 or 10 minutes behind, so we had to try to, they shrunk us a little bit, I think. But we hope that this baseline value that we talked about for those starting out and those that are really looking for some forward-thinking advances in your travel and meetings program together, you're really seeing this value. That was our goal today. And so I just want to thank everyone for staying, as we know it's getting time for lunchtime in the main program, but we appreciate all of your engagement and each of you attending. And this was really about exchanging ideas to advance the industry for travel and meetings. So one last thing. Be sure to check what's going on at the convention. It's time to move over to Andy Chowan, and he'll be taking the stage here momentarily. So make sure you exit and go to the next event. Thanks again.
Thank you.